Good morning. This is Ron. It's a little after 11 a.m. Sunday morning. We'll get started then. See if we have any questions. Uh, had a beautiful day yesterday. We started off with questions as we normally do, and then Pastor took us to Galatians 4. And many times I looked at, I had never seen those verses that kind of open things up to us. That stuff that we had already been talked about, but uh, already been talked about things that we had already discussed. But it had talked about the wives of Abraham and what they meant spiritually. And then it talked about the scriptures, looking at things from an allegory. We've been talking about that all along. So that was an eye opener, and even kind of the doorway to where we were going. We went into a discussion that talked about really kind of tied things together, looking at the various creation stories that have been in the world since the beginning, I suppose, or whenever times that the various times they came into play, but tying all those together and looking at what we're studying now and where we are, and looking at the sun, SUN, and the spiritual role that it plays, and not uh, you know debunking anything that we've discussed, but kind of using that to enhance what we already have discussed and know. And so here we are today. And if you want further details, and I'll let Pastor explain it to you. But here we are today, and see where this takes us. But we'll do as we normally do: start off and see if we have any questions. Anyone? Questions or comments? Excuse me. No one? Okay. Uh,
Ron, I have a question
yes,
since
ma'am.
no one else is going to ask. Well, I have a comment. I always wondered why people in the Bible never had last names. It always said it would have Peter from this place, Jesus of Nazareth. And I think after we've talked about, Pastor's been bringing us to the awareness of the stories in the Bible or allegories. Is that why there weren't any names, last name put on these concepts? Because they're allegories?
Yeah, and I'll let him go in more detail. Not only they not need last name, they weren't people. These were these names describe the journey, if you would, or describe what we were looking at. It kind of painted a picture more than looking at a Peter and trying to identify with the man. We identify with his purpose, with the character of the name. So if someone else can help a little further with that, please help me out.
They didn't need last names because the words that were used, that were translated into proper names, were done so in order to control the message, control the narrative. So there was no effort to make to put last names in it.
Okay, all right, calm down.
Let me, George, would you mute, please?
Sorry.
That's okay. Let me give you an example of what I'm making an effort to articulate. When we look at the Bible in particular, we saw yesterday how the Bible is an allegory. We read in Galatians 4:21, I believe it was, the allegory about Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar, saying that the Bible is an allegory, period. um, the proper names that were used, keep in mind that all of those names were European names. And if you look at the meaning of those names, that is what was hidden. So there was no need for a last name. At some point, I am going to deal with the what it means to live in a Hellenistic time. That will give great clarity to what you are asking, Evelyn. But until that time, let me say that the period between Malachi and Matthew, what have we been taught about that? Have we not been taught that the period between Malachi and Matthew is a period when the heavens were shut up for 400 years? Have you guys heard of that? This is not rhetorical. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yes, Lord.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that period of time is not a period when man did not hear from heaven. That period of time has books during that period of time that were taken out of the Bible. And the reason they were taken out of the Bible for the most part, especially the book of Maccabees, is because the book of Maccabees is the chronology of what took place between those periods. The Old Testament is an allegory about creation and tells us how to relate to it. And the period between Malachi and Matthew is a period that was left barren because it gives a greater clarity of what happened. You will find in the book of the Maccabees how the Greeks introduced a Hellenistic period when Alexander ruled in Egypt or in Northern Africa, how they forced, with the help of the priests or the pastors, they forced the people to abandon their cultural beliefs and embrace the beliefs of the Greeks, the Greek culture. And they did it by saying, let us become one people. Is that not the same thing that happened with integration, so-called integration? Let us become one people. But what they actually meant was, you're going to abandon your culture and you're going to pick up ours. So when we understand that aspect of how we got to where we are, it is then that we are more able to see that the names, the proper names, do not matter. What matters is the message. Let me stop right there and see if I'm helping you, Evelyn, for that in clarity to that question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Let me ask if there are other questions before we go further. Okay, Ron.
Yes, sir.
Questions?
I have a question. This is Vermel. Yesterday we talked, you explained a bit about the zodiac signs. And today I was watching something about this being a lunar year for the Chinese. Their signs are similar to are associated also to the zodiac signs, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The signs of the zodiac are really spaces of energy in the universe. They're pockets of energy in the universe. And you know how we talk about the Lion's Gate, the release of energy? There is a continuous release of energy in regards to the 12 zodiac signs. And they are released when the rays of the sun enters that pocket. And for the period that the rays of the sun is in that pocket of the universe, that energy is being released constantly. And being born during that period of energy has an influence on your personality, an influence on the people who were born during that period. Is not set in concrete, which means that there is nothing forced upon you. You don't have to respond the way that the words described as zodiac sign. Because if you were required to do that, it would overshadow your free will. Now, if you are in search of truth, if you are a person who desires to have some sense of who you are in a spiritual sense, then what happens is you will find yourself, your life rather, being reflective of what the energies of that particular zodiac sign. Does that make sense?
Say that last part one more time, please.
Yes.
You will find your life being reflective of the sign of that zodiac, the energy that's within that particular zodiac. When we talk about Leo the lion, I don't deal with the rest of them because I'm a Leo. So when we talk about the Leo the lion and the aspects of that, we can see that manifested in the lives of people who were born that period. The other thing about the zodiacs, if you look at them very carefully, they do not follow the Gregorian calendar at all. Because what is it, the 27th of July into August is the Leo. So it doesn't follow the Gregorian calendar at all. It follows the original calendar that came out of the constellation Virgo. That began with the constellation Virgo that was established by Africans hundreds of thousands of years ago. Does that help, Ron?
Yes. Vanille, does that help? Oh, someone,
Of the male?
I can't remember where else.
Yes, it does. It takes me a minute to. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. So are there any other questions? Because there are some things I want to share with us.
Pastor Jay. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
I hear you.
There's something Ron had said about the reason why the last names are not on these concepts. And he was saying it's because of the different journeys. Is that what you said, Ron? Something to that nature?
I said that they represent a journey. The scriptures represent pictures so we could see, because that's how we think. It's in story form because of how we think and what we see. So the names are speaking of character. And when you pull it out, the desire is speaking, it usually touches a character in you. And as like we've said before, there's nothing in the scripture that doesn't touch you. There's, you can identify with every character in there if you're honest with yourself. So that's what it speaks to, who you are and what your desires are. So I just said it speaks of a journey, the journey of man, what journey you choose to take for yourselves is what I was trying to say.
Okay, so Pastor Jay and teachers and family. So what you guys are doing is when you teach or when you facilitate, you're teaching us, you helping us remember who we are. Because I was talking to someone yesterday and I was telling them that you guys are just helping us remember who we are. What you're telling us is nothing new. It's just that you're helping us remember who we are. Am I correct on that?
You are indeed. See, when when we hear the truth, we might not want to embrace it. We may simply want to reject it totally, but you cannot deny that you felt it. For example, yesterday, I'm sure that there are people who are struggling with what we talked about yesterday. That's to be expected. Have no issues with that at all. However, there's something in you that awakened, and you know that it made sense, but it never made sense before because you hadn't heard it. There is something in the African memory bank that is stored from the beginning. And when the African hears the truth about itself, that truth awakens something within it, bringing it to memory who it was from the beginning, even though you may not be able to articulate it, even though you may not understand it, there is something in you that tells you, yes, this makes sense. Does that help you?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
See, you're quite welcome. Thank you. We were deculturalized. What do I mean by that? In, what is it? From 332 BCE to 195 BCE. The Greeks ruled Northern Africa. And it didn't end in 195 BC, by the way. 195 BC is important because that was the period when the African had pretty much forgotten who it is. The deculturalization took place, and I don't even know whether that's a word or not, but anyway, it is now. Deculturalization took place for the express purpose of control, the control of the mind of the African. So if we were deculturalized, then what was left after we were deculturalized? When we were deculturalized, it was important that we be Europeanized. And after the 10th generation, all thoughts of the African culture had been washed out of the mind of the Africans. And it was done because in the first generation, those who disobeyed were killed. Second generation, third, et cetera, same thing, they were killed. And by the time they got to the 10th generation, there was no resistance. Now, during this period of the Europeanization of the African, the foundation that was being laid was a foundation that would make it easier to Christianize the African. there were Africans who were Christianized before the enslavement of us Africans. The the Christianizing of the African was easier to do because the principles of the African were used in doing it. The principles that Africans understood were the principles that we talked about yesterday in reference to Heru. And during this generational process of deculturizing and putting in its place European concepts, during this period, that is when we started getting the transitional, the European transitional stage as to what the Bible or what the holy books are saying. They were holy writings, I should say, because there was no Bible then. They began to use the writings out of Kemet, out of the holy place, and they began to translate them in such a manner that will put them in a place of superiority. And they did it subliminally. See, it takes a lot of work to deculturalize a people. It takes strategy. It takes power. It takes a deep sense of evilness in order to be successful at doing this. So rather than use Heru, which is a Horus, both of those are the same person, which is a word that has its origin in the African vernacular. They substituted it with Jesus. And they took all of the disciples of Heru and gave them European names. And in doing so, they were subconsciously Europeanizing / Christianizing the African. And look at where we are, because we look at Matthew, James, and John, or Matthew, Luke, and all the rest of them as being people who lived in history when it really isn't. And the European has never truly intended to abide by the concepts that are in what we call the Bible now. Many of these concepts that we see there were manipulated and to the advantage of the European. And they never intended to live by that. They never intended to live by those principles, but they intended to force us to live by those principles for the express purpose of exploitation. These principles of which I speak are the ones that we've mentioned in the past, and you can look up, you can do a word search and find them, like the principles of Maat, and Maat spelled M-A-A-T. And if you want to look, Google that and look at those principles, they're available to you online. This was done over a period of time. And when I say that Europeans had no inclination at all to be what they called a Christian, and if you think that they had any intent of being a Christian, what they deemed to be a Christian, look at how they functioned. The African was more Christian than the European. To this day, Europeans have no desire to live by the principles that they deem to be Christian principles. These principles that are deemed to be Christian principles are the principles that came out of Kemet with alterations for the benefit of Europeans. Am I clear so far?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Any questions so far? So, what am I saying to you? I'm saying to you that we have been forced to worship pagan gods. We have been forced to worship Jesus, even though this Jesus is, the story of Jesus is an allegory that has its origin in Kemet. We were forced to worship a man, to be submissive to a man. Every Easter, the same man is crucified. When the whole idea of crucifixion speaks to the attempt to destroy, to kill the spiritual life of the African. It has no value other than to control people. You look at Christmas. Christmas has been instituted for the express purpose to bring about a misunderstanding of what we talked about yesterday in terms of the sun taking ending his journey traveling south on December 22nd, ended, and rising again headed north 3 days later, which is December 25th. This is set to be a birth date of a European creation called Jesus. And this birth date of this creation is deemed to be a holy period. And if you refuse to recognize it as that, then you are considered a heathen or reprobate. Now, keep in mind that these concepts are only a couple of thousand years old. Yet the true concepts are hundreds of thousands of years old. And we have been Hellenized to the place where we are more apt to fight to hold on to the lie that Christianity has told us, as opposed to the truth that we are able to see from the writings of Kemet. This Hellenization did not start with slavery, as I said earlier. However, it has continued from 332 BCE up to this period where we are now. It's a continuous process. And during this process, over the last 2,000 years, what has happened to us? We have lost our connection to who we are. And in having lost our connection to who we are and have no clarity of thought when it comes to the spiritual nature of our being, we have totally submitted to pagan gods. Now, when we understand or when we awaken as our ancestors were, as our elders are, what do we see? We hear rather, or we heard them say things like, I wouldn't have a white man's God. We've heard them say things like, Jesus is not that stringy-haired man painted on their wall. Those kinds of things. We've heard that. We've heard them say that Jesus has no color. We've heard all of these things. And what they were saying from the depth of their soul is this: I call it Jesus because that's all I know. But I know it's something deeper than that. They're saying it not in those words, but that's what they are experiencing. And that's what we are bringing to the light now. We are bringing to the light the tangible concepts of spirituality that they were talking about but did not understand. We are in a period right now where God, where the Creator, where Avun has called for the leadership of men, whether it's male or female. The messenger of God is not called to move forward unless the people are in a place of detriment, on the precipice of destruction, on the precipice of forgetting who they are. We are in Babylon, and we cannot sing the Lord's songs in Babylon because, number one, we don't know them anymore. And number two, even as we do, we will not sing them till we are free. And the messengers who have been sent to bring deliverance to the people by our Creator, by the one who brought us into this place called Earth 4 million years ago. The messengers who've been called to bring about this understanding and the deliverance cannot be contaminated with politics or greed. I understand clearly now, more than ever before, the reason that I had to walk away from politics. And you guys remember me saying, I can't do this anymore. I cannot be political anymore. Politics does not allow me to make the righteous decisions. Politics forces me to make political decisions. I accepted the responsibility of being a messenger to the people for our Creator before I even knew what the message was. The message is to remind us of the essence and purpose for which we were brought into this earth. When the messenger is sent, the gates of hell cannot stand against the message. Before I go further, let me add, are there any questions? I want to read a verse to you. This is Matthew 16 and 18. It's from the Message Bible that I'm reading it. And it's in reference to Peter being the rock upon which the church would be built. The Message Bible and the Aramaic rendition are so close until it brings rather more clarity than anything else. It says, verse 18, Jesus speaking, and now I'm going to tell you who you are. Speaking of Peter, who you really are. You are Peter, a rock. This is the rock upon which I will build or I will put together my church. A church so expansive with energy that not even the gates of hell will be able to keep it out. What is that talking about? We know that this is a metaphor. What is he saying? He's saying that when the people I'm sorry, he's saying that the messenger will bring the people together with an understanding that they've never had before. And this gathering is so expansive and has so much energy, so much power that the gates of hell cannot enter or stand against it. What does that mean? The gatekeepers of hell, the gatekeepers of the Hellenistic society, the gatekeepers of unrighteousness, the gatekeepers of evil will not be able to prevail against the message that is being sent through the messenger. And that message is a message that speaks to who we are and who we always have been. But the knowing of that has been overshadowed by a belief, a system of concepts that were brought into existence for the express purpose of vilifying the African, for the express purpose of saying that the African, of trying to prove the African inferior, but at the same time keeping the African close, because knowing Europeans knew that they could not exist without the presence of the African, because of when they went into Kemet, what they saw was such an advanced society, it shocked them. And they wanted everything that Kemet had. So in order to do that, they Europeanized them and Christianized them. And in doing so, blinded them to who they are. And that's where we are at this very moment. And when I say we, I'm not talking about the messengers who has been called for this express purpose of opening the eye of humanity. I'm talking about those who we were. Because see, we are not the same people we were when we started this journey. We are totally different because our mindset has changed. We are in the process of having released from our souls the true nature of who we are, who we have always been. Now we are beginning to see it. And when we begin to see it, when we embrace it, we begin to think like the Twa of Okebelon. Okebelon meaning Africa. We don't think like African. We think like Okebelonians. We think like the original us. That's our mindset. And that's where we are headed on this journey. And when we embrace this journey based upon the truth that the Creator is showing us, then we bring balance, we bring harmony, we bring peace to mankind, because we have always been a people of peace, a people of loving kindness, a people who is full of forgiveness. And peace cannot come from the evil mindset that created all the disharmony in the earth. Peace comes from the heart of peace, the soul of peace itself. Questions or comments? Audrey?
That's a lot. Um, the question that I had, you answered basically, because I was gonna ask, was the gates of hell equivalent to being in the Hellenistic mindset? So you answered that question, but the other thing is, and I've been processing this a lot, is that I can see if those people in Kemet were living by the laws of Ma'at, then yes, they would have been loving, kind, they would have been welcoming, they would have been peaceful to the conquering Greeks. So I can see how the Greeks would have been able to conquer them. And I can also see now that, as you say, we are starting to change our mindset. And it's been really profound for me because, and that's why I asked the question the other day about Jesus mentioning Ptah, because it goes way beyond Christianity. It goes way beyond Judaism. It goes way beyond any Hellenistic ideas of what the creator is or was or any of that. So yeah, it's a lot.
Thank you. You're right. It is. When we look rather at this particular verse, is it not saying that the gathering of what the Greeks call the ecclesia, the gathering of the people around the messenger has so much energy, nothing can overcome it. Is it not saying, could it not be saying that the opening of Ptah allows for the gathering of the people around the messenger? And that message is so full of energy and power that the gatekeepers of hatred and racism and Christianity, the gatekeepers of a reprobate nation, the gatekeepers of the European mindset, the greed and the lynchings, they will not be able to prevail. And if they are not able to prevail, does it not mean that the message is the power that is able to overcome the gatekeepers? Is it not saying that in order for you to be a messenger, you have to be something different than what you were. Because if you look at what's written in the verse, they are speaking about things that Europeans could not hide. They thought they were. But think about it this way. What he's saying is, Peter, you were Hellenistic at one time. You believed what you had been told by the Europeans who invaded. But now there is a reckoning coming. And that reckoning that's coming has the power and the energy that will deliver the people, and not even the gates of hell. What are the gates of hell? Hell speaks to death or the dead or the place of the dead. What he's saying is, those who have kept you in death for all of these years, you have been kept in a state of death and you didn't know you were dead. And I want to add something to that. You didn't know you were dead, but you were dead and alive at the same time. You were dead in your mind because your mind was following these Hellenistic concepts. You were alive in your soul, but you have forgotten what your soul is. And you have attributed your soul to be tantamount to what your mind is based upon the Hellenistic concepts that you have been forced to believe. But now, Peter, the day has come. The day has come that the message brought by the messenger will not seek to be on the city council, will not bring the politicians in to speak in front of its congregation. The messenger will not argue about how much money he makes or she makes. The messenger is not concerned with the popularity that others are concerned with. The messenger is not the modern day pastor. The messenger is hidden in a cave, speaking volumes, and everyone hearing it, but nobody hearing the voice or knowing where it came from. The messenger is different than the modern day pastor who wants every politician to come speak to the congregation so he can be influential. The messenger has no desire for corporations to reach down and pull him up and make him a leader, which in essence is making him a detractor from the people, making him an overseer of the people. Pastors are overseers of the people. Pastors are those who refuse to search for the truth because it is not financially advantageous for them to tell the truth. And the reason I know that is because I said to a prominent pastor in Gaffney, a pastor who had tremendous influence, I stood before my people, I said, and told them what I've taught you is wrong. However, I promise you, I will teach you what's in the scriptures from this day forward. If it's not there, I will not teach it. And I said that to him. And he said to me, I can't tell my people I was wrong. If that's not arrogance, what is it? If that's not someone who's trying to protect a status position, etc., what is it? The messenger, the messengers cannot afford to submit to the gates of hell. Guess what else? The messenger cannot afford to remain in a state of death. The messenger tastes life. And when the messenger tastes life, the messenger doesn't even know what life is until it tastes it. And once that taste is there, none of us have anything to go back to because we are messengers. We've tasted freedom. We have tasted life. We are still in the process of disrobing ourselves of death. We are no longer walking in the valley of death. We are now walking in the light of truth and righteousness. And we have interludes with where we came from. And that's not a bad thing because it reminds us of where we came from and it prevents us from elevating ourselves above those who we have been brought into this earth to lead. You can't be a messenger. If you say to someone, if you say to someone, we are Word Church, if you say to someone, oh my God, here we go with that Jesus stuff again. You are not a messenger, you're a problem. You cannot speak to anyone in dehumanizing ways. The truth only prevails when the truth is told. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is George. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Pastor, I just wanted to, just reflect on, you were speaking of Peter and referencing Matthew 16, verse 18. And we've heard the saying where it talks about, Peter being the rock. Okay. And in our understanding of that, it made me think about the builder who was rejected. I'm trying to recall that exact verse.
Stone that was rejected.
The stone that was rejected. And so in that stone, when we talk about patah, we're going back and we're looking at the truth. But there's a saying that says that truth crushed to the ground shall rise. Okay? Truth thrown into the waters shall rise. And I think that we're coming into an awareness now that not just in terms of linguistically understanding the words, but looking at the perceptions of what was given to us through the teachings of Catholicism. Now, my point is, we saw the picture of the Lord's Supper, but we know that Michelangelo did not have any knowledge about what that would look like, but it was painted for the purpose of Constantine saying, you have to paint something that represents, you know what I mean, what Catholicism about. So I think, again, as we dive a little bit deeper, it just makes us all realize the importance of us being aware and paying attention to what the Spirit is teaching us. And I'll use a last example of the truth. Lake Lanier was a city where there were many Africans who lived, but they basically covered that up in the waters. But again, truth thrown in the water shall rise. And I think that this is very pertinent to what we're saying, because as Evelyn mentioned earlier, to know thyself and to know who you are, is again manifesting in a way that we talk about creative manifestation. So again, I just wanted to share those thoughts because I was thinking about the stone that the builders rejected when we talk about patah. And I think going back and now understanding this in the principles of what, again, Audrey talked about as far as the principles of Ma'at. And so truth, we come back to that truth. We come back to that balance. We come back to that harmony. We come back to that righteousness. We come back to reciprocity. And so I believe, again, we're where we are and where we need to be, but it's something about what you said this morning from the Message Bible that again that resonated. So I just wanted to share those thoughts. I'm done.
Thank you. Lake Lanier, George mentioned, is in Georgia. And it was an entire Black town that white people decided it was not going to exist anymore because they were too prosperous. So they flooded the town. And beneath Lake Lanier to this day are remnants of that community. And I simply want to put that out there because so you would know the connection between that. And what I got from what George was saying is this: those remnants that are beneath the waters of Lake Lanier, the truth that was embodied by those who were forced out and some who were drowned, is rising from the depths of the waters. And now is walking on the surface of the waters to make sure that the energy and the light of truth is not only seen with the eye, but also is heard with the soul. Thank you. Questions or comments?
I have a comment. And while you were talking about Lake Lanier, they cannot kill us. You cannot kill us. We will never die. No matter how hard you try, you cannot kill us. We'll always be here. But anyway, while you were talking earlier, I was looking up. I was wondering why the migration is taking place. All these people, as they say, crossing the border and everything. And then I looked. I wanted to know what the definition of migration is. And did migration have anything to do with us, what we're talking about today? And Google says, darn it, that migration is, I asked what was the spiritual meaning of migration. And it says, God migrates people to fulfill his redemptive purpose and plans. And I don't know if Google meant to put that out there or whatever, but is that why people of color are crossing the borders? Because to bring God's plan into fruition and to help us move this to where we need to be? That's my question.
40,000 years ago, Africans migrated to Europe to spread an understanding, to spread truth, to bring into existence Europeans. 40,000 years ago, Africans crossed into Europe. And 10,000 years ago, the skin color began to change based upon genetics that carried by Africans. Between 6,000 and 8,000 years ago, the first pink person appeared, the first white person appeared. The purpose of the migration was to populate the planet for the benefit of humanity and honor to our Creator. Today, the migration across the border is about retribution, repossession, and exposure. The people who are crossing the border today, for the most part, are coming home. The Southeast territories from Texas to California was in the hands of the people south of what we call the Rio Grande border. And they are coming home for reclamation to reclaim what belongs to them. But the gatekeepers are retaliating against anyone who seeks freedom or reclamation. So I see the border crossings as being orchestrated by the divine for the express purpose of minimizing the power of the gatekeepers and maximizing the understandings of the people of color, especially the African, about who they are. Does that help you, Evelyn?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good.
We're to welcome what's about to happen, what's about to take place, because we know it's for the good of mankind. And again, I cannot look at this on the surface, but I know that these things must be. So,
It's not so much as welcoming them as embracing what we have created. We are the ones who created this through our desires. You cannot seek the truth and not see the things that have been fighting against the truth being exposed. It's not going to happen. There's always going to be gatekeepers who retaliate against those who are seeking freedom. And there is no freedom without truth. Bondage is always the offspring of a lie. Truth is this freedom that all men seek to enjoy. Bondage, no one is in bondage unless someone puts them in bondage. And no one is kept in bondage unless there's someone who convinces them that they are supposed to be in bondage, or convinces them that they are free even though they're still in bondage. Until the truth is exposed of what bondage and freedom looks like, bondage will continue. We are at a place where truth resides, where truth prevails. We didn't understand it. We didn't know what we were doing. We were totally ignorant of what we were doing at that time. If you remember, when we met in December, when was it? It was usually the winter solstice, was it not? It was during the winter solstice when we met. We had no idea that the sun had stopped and was waiting for the seeds of our desires to be sown. And 3 days later, it nurtured those desires as it rose from the dead. That's what we were doing and didn't know it. Now that we are aware of it, how much stronger is it? How much credence does it give to what we are teaching and seeing today? Let me share something with you. Let me show you how we have been duped. Do you know when Palestine came into existence? Palestine came into existence after the Suez Canal was built. Do you know why the Suez Canal was built? Of course, it was on the surface. It was shipping. It allowed ships to cross without having to go around the Horn of Africa. But there also was an effort to separate the landmass that was excavated for the Suez Canal from Africa. There has always been efforts to separate the landmass from Africa. For example, where is Saudi Arabia? Come on, y'all. Somebody on here knows some geography. Where is Saudi Arabia located? Where? Where's Oman located?
Well, they tell us it's the Middle East.
Where's Iran located? Same thing, right?
Yep.
So why do they call it the Middle East when it is Africa? It is an effort to minimize Africa and Africans. And in these places that I've asked you about, they are occupied by Semites. They are controlled by Semites. No one want to talk about the Semites in the way they really are. There's always been a lie when it came to Semites and Semitic languages. There's always been a lie about it. The truth of the matter is these places are in the hands, are under the control of Semites. And the reason that they are embraced so readily is because these Semites are offsprings of European and Asians. Yes, there are Africans who they intermarry with as well. But the primary origin of Middle Easterners, and I put that in air quotes, and the primary origin of Arabs is from the intermarrying of Europeans and Asians, which means that they are Semites. Again, another effort to minimize Africa. Now, let me show you something else in this, since we were talking about it. In Nigeria, there are huge amounts of oil beneath the ground. And the government of Nigeria was forced to sign a pact with Great Britain, saying that BP has total control of the oil in Nigeria. Why did they not do that to Saudi Arabia? Because Saudi Arabia is occupied by their offspring. George said, "Truth crushed to the ground shall rise again." If that is true, and it is, then who is being crushed to the ground? The culture, the spiritual understandings, the historical value of the African is being crushed to the ground. But now is rising from the ground, is coming out of a consciousness that sought to destroy it. So the truth is being resurrected from a consciousness that sought to bury it. If you tear this temple down, I will raise it again in 3 days. If you seek to bury the truth will resurrect in 3 days. That speaks to the sun. That's why we had to meet during the winter solstice, in order for the truth to rise again, for resurrection to take place in 3 days. And every time we met, life was being brought up from the rubbles of lives for the purpose of bringing truth and freedom to all of mankind. That's where we are. This is who we are. I'm done. Unless there are questions or comments.
Hey, Pastor, this is Charles.
Yes,
When
sir.
you mentioned that 3 days, what does the 3 days represent? Of I know Jesus went and the ground. Well, what did that represent now, or what you're talking about in 3 days?
Okay,
I will get up in 3.
when we talked yesterday about the sun heading south annually, and on the December the 25th, it stops. And when it stops, it is during the winter solstice. And that's when we talk about the days getting longer. So if we look at it spiritually, what it's saying is that the sun, which is the source of all life on this earth, stops on the 22nd of December. And it begins to move back north on December 25th, which is a resurrection of 3 days. So what we are saying in essence is this, that during the winter solstice, death occurs. And what that death is speaking to in our case is the death of the lies that we have been told, the death of the lies that have kept us in bondage. And the disease of desire for truth are sown during that period. And 3 days later, after the 22nd, is December 25th. And that is when the sun begins to travel back north. Why? Because when you speak of it metaphorically, when the sun travels south and the north is darkness, and the light is going back to the darkness, but at the same time, it is nurturing everything that's being brought back to life. And that is why you begin to see not only the days longer, but there is a rejuvenation of all of the plants, a rejuvenation of the grass that died, that went into hibernation during what we call the winter months. And it doesn't look like life is coming back, but it is. And we begin to see that regeneration months later. Does that make sense, Charles?
Yes, it does.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Yeah, Pastor, it's Ron. I got a question. Someone text me to speak to the Moors in Europe.
The word Moor simply means black. North Africans, in North Africa, there was the invasion that we talked about. And in order to rebel against the Hellenistic society, Africans realized they were going to have to fight back. And a military unit of Africans crossed the Alps. And when they crossed the Alps into Sicily, and when they crossed the Alps and conquered Spain, they were called the Moors because they were black. It's not a tribe. It simply means black, just like Ethiopia means the burnt skin. It means black. That's like Kush means black. That's why they were called Moors. The reality of it is this. They, as well as us, are Twa Umbuti. No matter what we call ourselves, our origin is from Twa Umbuti people. So when they are called the Moors, is no different than Spaniard San Negro, which is black. So it's in reference to the color of the skin. I don't know who, however, I will ask you to send the text to Ron if it's clear. If it's not, please send him a question. Anyone have any questions or comments about that? See,
Yeah.
I was just think, go ahead, George.
Yeah, good morning, Pastor. No, I think that again, in terms of when you talk about what the Africans brought to the European culture, I mean, in terms of their spiritual insight, their heart, soul, they brought a lot that contribute to Europe. And I think, the point was again, just acknowledging that in terms of learning, how spiritually aware they were, that brought a lot of cultivation to Europe. I think that was the point of asking the question.
Okay. Also, the group called Moors came into existence after Christianity because they were Muslims. In Islam, Christianity predates Islam. So these were Muslims who were crossed into quote unquote Christian nations in order to respond to the Inquisition, to respond to what the Christians were doing to people who refused to submit to them. And the Christians are the ones who call them Moors. Does that make sense? Did you get a response, Ron?
No.
Okay. Well, then I have to assume then that the understanding was there.
Yes.
Throughout history, Africans have always been called different names. I mean, look at it in America. Look how many names you've had in America. So, but you're saying, if you're saying the Moors came after Christianity, they didn't exist prior to that. This
That's not what I'm
was
saying. That's not what I'm
okay.
saying. What I'm saying is that Ron and his group came into South Carolina, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have never encountered an army like you. We don't know who you are. We don't even care. But we go call you black. We go call you Moors. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's how it happened.
Okay. Okay.
This is not a tribe of people at all. This was a designation by Christians, and primarily in Sicily.
Pastor Jay,
Yes.
I see us as like Melchizedek.
But you can't, baby.
Because what?
You can't, because we do have an origin.
Okay, but and the reason why I said that, because people keep trying to define who we are, or to give us a name, and they can't just label us, and that's why I thought about Melchizedek.
May I help you with that?
Yes, sir. I'm open to that. Thank you.
We're not Melchizedek because we know where we came from. But when it comes to the Creator raising up messengers in order to deliver the people from bondage, no one knows the origin of that message. You don't know where it came from. You don't know when it came, but all you know is there. That's the sense of Melchizedek. That's the sense of the messenger being the message. And it is a message of righteousness. Does that make sense?
It does. Melchizedek, help me understand, Melchizedek knew what it was, but no one else did.
And Melchizedek,
am I right saying that?
Yes, it didn't know what it was until it became what it was. It says that Melchizedek broke bread with Abraham, right?
Yes.
If Abraham is a womb to all nations, which is father of nations, then what it's actually saying is that Melchizedek, the messenger, the spiritual message, became one with a message of deliverance for the nations. And it goes on to tell the story of Abraham, which talks about how the spiritual nation was developed or brought into the minds of humanity. Does that make sense?
I'm processing.
Which means you don't understand it yet. That's okay. Melchizedek, let's say that what I'm saying now makes me Melchizedek because I don't know where the message is coming from. All I know is him. Makes sense?
Yes.
So the one to carry this further or to bring it into existence, in other words, if you can see an outline of what's supposed to be, that's what the message is. And Ron or George or Audrey, they are the ones who are to bring it to explain it in a spiritual manner to humanity, so humanity will understand. In order for it to become spiritual and understand who it is, it has to give up all of its material ambitions and desire to walk the pathway of truth and righteousness, leaving everything behind. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's how I see the relationship between Melchizedek and Abraham in regards to who we are and who we are today. However, I do invite anyone who can help me clean that up, or who can help me make it clearer. Just speak now, please, if that's necessary. Tell me what you're hearing. Tell me what you hear. Tell me what you heard in that explanation. Come on, somebody. You gonna make me say, help me now.
I'm sorry, I was looking up something, Pastor. I'm looking up something you said earlier. Sometimes you talk and I get off the boat and I start wandering on the land somewhere. And
We're going to tie you to the mast of the boat so you can't get off.
I gotta run down there and catch up with the boat. So, but
what were you looking up?
Give me 2 minutes. I'll.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
Hey, Pastor, I have one question. I know we all came from Africa. Do you know what part of Africa that we originated from?
Southeastern Africa. That's what.
Explain a little bit. Explain a little bit more.
In the southeastern part of Africa, which is Ethiopia, I think it's Sudan, that area, Tanzania, I'm sorry, Kenya, in that area, that's where we came from. That's where the Twa people came from. It's
Okay.
just like me saying, where did the black folk in New York come from? They came from Charleston. We got off the boat in Charleston. So where is Charleston? Charleston is in the southeast of the United States. That's the only thing I could tell you. So I'm just telling you the land or the area on the land where we originated.
Okay. All right. I can handle that.
Okay. Thank you.
The part that this is something I had looked at a long time ago, and I was trying to find the verses. in Genesis 14. But I always thought of Melchizedek as the part of Abraham or the part of that man that he didn't know. He wasn't familiar with. He was not familiar with his spiritual essence. So the spiritual essence come and say, I want to commune with you. I want to break bread, but it's a lot more in here. And I was just trying to piece it all together. So when you said he didn't know it was until I forgot how you worded it, but that's
He
what
didn't know who he was until he became him.
yeah, the him is the Abraham become recognizing fully who he was. That's what I was trying to piece together.
Okay, I can see that.
And all those wars and all those things happen. All of those are those internal battles that we have, that those strongholds, if you will, or those principles or those kings or whatever that have hold of us that we have to set aside and reckon with. So anyway.
Okay. I can see that, Ron. Any other questions or comments?
This is Angie. I got a question. It's kind of different, but when we talk about, well, I'm just saying earthquakes, looking at it from the spiritual perception and the physical, but when earthquakes, is it possible? I know it causes destruction, but shifting and moving things that from a physical, moving things that was hidden, restructuring, how is it? I'm trying to, restructuring things that need to be revealed, and also doing something spiritual. But it just was something, I can't really form the question, but it was just something that came to me about, earthquake, revealing things that just like could be things that was hidden, as far as things being changed around, covered up, man-made lakes. But then you got also spiritually what earthquakes do within, reshaping things and bringing us to our spiritual essence. It's just
there's a scripture that says that, I think it was Elijah who was trying to hear the voice of the Creator, and he looked for the voice in the earthquake, and it was he listened for the voice in the thunder. And then it says that he spoke to him, meaning the Creator spoke to him in a still small voice. So when I think about the earthquake spiritually, I see what is happening now. The words that we have spoken are the tectonic plates that move, that produces an earthquake. And these spiritual tectonic plates have shifted, and everything that has been hidden is being brought to the surface now. Does that help you, Angela?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Can you guys see that? Any questions about that?
Yeah.
I have a question as well, kind of
Sure, go
piggybacks
ahead.
off of that.
Uh-huh.
So you know how hurricanes start at the coast of Africa and essentially follow the slave trade, and it hits the south and ends up in the north?
Yes.
Why is that?
The trade winds that comes from Africa to the East Coast and to the south of the Americas, to the south of North America, rather. These trade winds are these currents, rather, are the currents that were followed in order to navigate the ships to the east. And one of the main reasons that South Carolina was a deportation point for enslaved people is because it was easier to direct the ship to South Carolina because of the currents. The trade winds, the winds that during certain parts of the year have always blown in this direction. There were ships that were lost because they left in the wrong time of the year. those currents at a certain time of the year reverse themselves. And that is the period when the ships left this nation and went back to Africa to pick up more enslaved people. So these currents have always been in existence. Now, I believe that they were placed where they are in terms of the distance between the East and the West, because the Creator knew that these things were going to have to take place in order for us to truly embrace the reality of being Elohim, of being creators ourselves, as opposed to simply seeing us as mere men. We must see ourselves as Elohim, as God. Does that help you, ma'am?
Yes, thank you.
You're quite welcome. Now, I will say this also. There has been recently shift in the winds. And what we've begun to see is a huge amount of dust that usually is carried into the Amazon, into the Amazon to influence the ecology of the earth, have been coming into the southeast and traveling across the country, then northward and back out to sea. This speaks volumes to me. I don't see this as simply dust. I see this as a physical manifestation of the movement of ancestors, the energy of our ancestors to influence the way that we navigate in this society of hatred and racism. It gives us the strength and the power to continue on. It gives us an understanding of the wisdom that we need in order to bring about change and in order to be that change. Does that make sense? Jordan?
Yes, that does make sense.
All right, thank you.
Are-
Anyone?
Are
go ahead.
those hurricanes sort of, I don't know, like the earth crying out, the impetus for change?
I think they are, yes. And I'll tell you why. I believe the hurricanes are a message from the ancestors to those who stole us from Makabelon. The reason I say that is because we, along at the behest of the weather woman, I remember Kathy started talking about we have to do something about these hurricanes. And we made a decision that the hurricanes were no longer going to destroy South Carolina. And since then, no hurricane has destroyed South Carolina. Then I remember being in Philadelphia when this Category 4 was supposed to hit Philly and drown the city. And I remember saying to George and Levon, it's not going to happen. I'm not even worried about it. It's not going to happen. And I sat up all night dealing with that storm, the hurricane, and all the tornadoes that were supposed to fall out of the clouds into the earth. That didn't happen. And then I remember coming back home and someone said to me, we weren't even worried about it because we knew you were in Philly, you handled that. We dealt with it where we were here, but it was on you once it got to that area. I remember that. So I say all of that to say this. The reason they didn't happen and hasn't is because the ancestors were actually giving us the desires of our heart. And if the ancestors were doing that, then should not our desires now, should we not recognize rather that our desires are met by the wisdom of the ancestors? Does that make sense?
Carol.
Yes.
So when Audrey raises that question, it's simply because the power, the energy of the ancestors are so pervasive until the gatekeepers of hell cannot prevail against them. However, the African can. Can you see that? No matter what the gatekeepers did, they could not deal with it, but the African could deal with it and did. That's a message to us that I'm just now seeing. And that message is, trust who you are. Trust who you are. Trust who you are. The ancestors are always with you. The ancestors are always waiting for you not only to acknowledge, but to honor them. And you will see the results. Thank you. Thank you for the question, the comment.
I don't have a lot to add to that, Pastor, but I think about the verse we studied here recently in Mark. The words you just spoke are extremely powerful, remembering who you are. And that means sometimes if you have to close your eyes to see, close your eyes. There's so much stuff for us to focus on. And when we look at things with our eyes, it brings about fear. It brings about other stuff that is not a part of you that tries to climb back into you. Recognizing who we are, holding on to that. And as the scripture said before, Jesus put his fingers in the man's ear so the man could hear. The man had to know that the vibration he felt was coming from the inside and not the outside. The outside is only going to bring noise. So look at all the journey Pastor said at the onset of this today. We're not in the same place where we were. Where we are, I don't know. But we're not at the same place. But we are at a place that we recognize that we desire truth and peace and harmony. And that is what's going to prevail. Just hold on to who we are. Like I say, if you have to close your eyes. There was a book I had, and I can't remember, but it explained the righteous man can do this, the righteous man can do that. We have come to a place where the Creator is allowing us to see things that I don't believe any man is, any group of people have seen in the earth, to be able to tie these things together. Jesus put that, that those words have been in that book for how many generations, and it's just being dealt with, and it ties worlds together. So when you look at that word, it not only means open doors, it means to open worlds, open the world up that you need to be, open the world up that you want to see. So, I mean, those words sound so few that Pastor said, but they're very powerful. Recognize who you are. Hold on to that.
Thank you. I'm done, unless there are questions or comments.
Anyone? Well, been a good day. It's a good day. No question. If you have something come to you, shoot me a text, shoot Pastor a text, or anybody, and we'll go from there. We'll pick up tomorrow, okay? But thank you. Hope everyone have a good day the rest of the week, the rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of the day, excuse me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good day.
Take care, family.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.